Hacktoberfest 2021. I'll be the host for the event for this event. My name is Jikanshu, and I'll be hosting this event along with my co-host Sonakshi. So, as I've already mentioned what Hacktoberfest is and what you guys need to learn today, so without further ado, I'll just let Sonakshi introduce the speaker. So, over to you, Sonakshi.
Hi everyone. So finally the wait is over and our special guest, our prestigious guest who's going to be guiding us through all the information or every minute detail of what Hacktoberfest is about and how it's going to be. So he is here with us to introduce all the and present each and every data about it. So stick around till the end. Without any further ado, I would definitely want to tell a few of his accomplishments, although he's a great personality, but to mention few of them, I would like to say that he has served the industry as a software engineer at Vedantu. He has cracked GSOC 2019 and 2020 and has mentored for the same. Also, he is a co-founder of an amazingly beneficial application called the Mentor app. If you have not heard about what Mentor app is, I would definitely want to say that it is an amazing platform where you can learn one-on-one with on a personalized level with the experts from different fields. So definitely it's a must-have. Go ahead, check it out. So without any further ado and without wasting any time, I would like to introduce our speaker on behalf of student organization Oasis in collaboration with Student Chapter Geeks for Geek. Our speaker, Mr. Jaideep Prasad. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the webinar. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, guys. Thanks a lot for having me, right? So it's great that, a lot of people, I see a lot of people here. So it's great that, everybody could take out their time, right? And could join in this session. And hopefully this will be a great, valuable session to, everyone's careers, right? Even going forward, right? People who are, looking for, some good internships, right? Good jobs, right? In further in their career, right? So yeah, so looking forward to the session, right? So yeah, so I'll quickly share my screen and let's get started with today's session, right? So yeah, let me just quickly share my screen. Yeah, can you guys confirm if my screen is visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Great. So yeah, so first of all, like again, welcome to the session, right? So as you guys all know, right, that this is supposed to be, the ultimate guide for, cracking Hacktoberfest, right, or completing Hacktoberfest, if I say it in that way, right? But while preparing my presentation, or even like, in general, when I talk about open source, right, in various colleges, in various events, right? So the thing about open source is that it's not, particular to any program, right? Like, I've seen students run behind programs like, Google Summer of Code, right? Or maybe Outreachy, MLH, right? There are various lots of programs out there, right? So it's not just only about that, right? Open source in itself is quite a huge domain, right? And even like, further in your career when you will go for your internships, right, your maybe your jobs, right, at good product based companies or something like that, right? So even in there, like you what you will see that you are using open source Git and GitHub, right, on a daily basis, right? Because of course it won't be possible to like for everyone to sit together and code, right? And what open source is all about is that people can actually work on stuff from dwelling from different parts around the world or country, right? So that essentially is what open source is all about, right? So we will essentially be knowing more about that, how exactly what is open source, and how exactly we need to use Git and GitHub. And of course, like as the session is about, right, we will be doing a live hands-on, right, with how to make your first PR for your Hacktoberfest, right? So that is what we will be doing, right? So right, so yeah, so proceeding on that, right? So I won't be wasting a lot of time here, right? Like, the speakers, the hosts have already, given a warm welcome and have provided some humble words for me, right? So yeah, so currently, of course, I'm a co-founder of Mentro, right? So essentially, it's a free-to-use platform, right, for all students and job seekers, right? As it was mentioned right before the session, right? So of course, you guys will be, knowing more about it towards the end as well, right? So make sure you stick to it, right? So of course, like it's a free to use platform, right? For learning different domains, right? For connecting with professionals one on one, right? Like people working at Google, Microsoft, Amazon, right? PayPal, Flipkart, right? So you can actually, talk with them one on one, right? And take resume reviews, mock interviews, right? Placement roadmaps and whatnot, right? So I'm sure that once you guys check out the application, check out the platform, you guys will love it, right? So yeah, we'll be talking more about that, right? But other than that, yes, of course, like I've been part of Google some of code twice, right? I've worked at companies like Vedantu, Trail, Geo, right? So yeah, of course. And other than that, I've been an active open source contributor, as you can probably like see from here, right? So I've contributed to a lot of organizations, including Google as well, right? I've worked on Google's Flutter repository, right? So I've actually contributed a lot there as well, right? So yeah, so this has been like a very brief of what I've been doing over the last years, right? So yeah, this is probably me. You can of course like take a look at my GitHub profiles and all that, right? So yeah, so proceeding forward, right? So now coming to what Git is about, right? Like so here what you can see, there is a lot of text, right? Like you might be getting overwhelmed that a lot of text is written here and what actually is Git, right? So essentially, it is nothing but you can think like instead of reading through all this text, right? What I will suggest is that what Git is actually about is it's actually a guardian or a tracker for all your files and code which you maintain in a repository, right? So what is a repository? We will be again covering that in the further slides, right? So yeah, so Git is essentially, as you can see, that it's a distributed VCS, right? And what is a VCS? What is a version control system, right? Like we'll be knowing more about it, right? So it's essentially used for tracking changes in your source code, right, during software development, right? Now, when I'm talking about open source, like open source is a domain, right? And Git is actually a tool which helps us work in that domain, right? So essentially, like people from people sitting at different places, right, can actually work on the same piece of code or same piece of file, right, and make changes in that same file at the same time, right, but working at different locations, right, and every of their changes, right, which they make, right, at different points of time can actually be tracked, right? Like for example, if I am making some changes today and you are making some changes on like tomorrow or something, right? It can actually be tracked like after even 30 days or 1 year, right? Like what did actually happen on such and such date, right? And who exactly made that change, right? So that is the best part about Git, right? And so that is the tool which we use, right? There are various things how which we'll be learning how to use Git with, right? So yeah, so that is the main funda of what Git is all about, right? So of course, like there here we have learned some new words, right? Like there is version control system, right, and all this kind of new words we learned, right? So moving forward, now we should be knowing that what exactly a VCS is, right? Exactly a version control system is, right? So essentially it keeps changing, right? Like you whatever your code is, right, like you when you work on it, it will keep on changing, right, at over a period of time, right? If you're working on a project, you will be making changes every day, right? Like you will be working on different features, different bug fixes, right, on a daily basis. So your code and everything, all your project will keep on changing over a period of time, right? So that is exactly where the Git comes into play, right? So Git is actually VCS, right? So VCS is the domain, right? Like VCS is actually the tool, and Git is actually a VCS, right? So it helps in handling and maintaining all the history of what changes have happened, right, or in your code base, right? So of various features, right, which Git provides with you, right? So like there are things like branches, merges, commits, right? So we will be learning about those things in detail as well, right? So that is what Git is, right? So it's a version control system, right? And what version control system does is that it helps in keeping track of your code, which keeps on changing over a period of time, right? So that is the main definition of a VCS, right? And it helps in maintaining a history of what all changes have happened, right? So that is exactly, you will find that that is the same definition as Git, right? Because of course Git is a VCS, right? So that is what we learned about VCS, right? So now moving forward to learn in more detail, what Git is actually and how does it work, right? Now we have learned the definition that, okay, it's a guardian and maybe it, helps in maintaining track of our code files and whatnot, right? But what like how things happen here, or how, specifically we can think about it, right? So here is a very cool understanding, a very cool explanation, right? So which I'll share with you guys, right? So you can imagine Git as something that sits on top of your file system and manipulates files, right? Like let's say you have got a directory or a folder, right, which has got a lot of files in it, right? So you can imagine Git as something that sits on top of everything, right, of that folder, right, and helps you manipulate all the files in that folder essentially, right? So now this something, right, like as I was saying, that you can imagine Git as something, right? So what that something is, right? So that something is essentially a tree structure, right, where each commit creates a new node in that tree, right? Now here is a very good under explanation, right? So what you can think, as that something which we were mentioning, right, that what Git is, right? So it actually does the all the stuff, like how does it actually maintains or keeps track of all the history, right? So there is actually a tree structure, right, wherein you can see that there are all this like little leaves on it, right? So what these leaves are, these are individual commits, right? So what these commits are, like we will be discussing about that, right? So this tree has got a lot of leaves here, as you can see, right, which is essentially nothing but a commit. All are commits, right? Nearly all Git commands actually serve to navigate on this tree and to manipulate it accordingly, right? Like, so essentially there are a lot of Git commands, right? Like a lot of commands which we use to operate Git with, right? Like we how do we need to work with Git? Like there are a lot of commands which we use, right? So essentially, having said that, so those commands are essentially used to navigate through this tree, like checking out the commits, right? What all changes have been done on what day, right? So that is essentially like all the operations we can do using some Git commands, right? So yeah, so now moving forward, right? So what is repository, right? So we learned about, we were talking about a Git repository earlier, right, today. So essentially, the purpose of Git is to manage a project, right, or a set of files as they change over time, right, as we discussed already, right. So Git stores this information in a data structure called a repository, right. So now, what you can think, like, of course, I assume that most of us here, like, what already know what data structures are, right. Like we already have heard about arrays, linked lists, stacks, right. Like these are some common popular data structures, right. So essentially, that here the repository is the same as of a data structure for Git, right? Which is nothing but a tree, right? Essentially, as we discussed, right? Nothing. If we can think repository as a tree and its leaves as commits, right? So that is what the whole explanation boils down to, right? Like repository is nothing but a tree, right? Which has got various leaves on it, and those leaves are nothing but a set of commits, right? So what commits is like what now talking about what commits are, right? Like so commits is something which is the work which you have done on a particular day. Like let's say you have changed like 2 to 3 files, right, on today, right, and you want to save it, right? So how will you exactly save it? Like there is no save button in Git, right? So what we do is that we run a couple of commands, right? Like first we run the git add command and then we do the git commit command, right? So what once you execute these two commands, a leaf is created, right? Like once you execute a command, like you will like you can think, right? Like on a branch, right? A new leaf is created, right? So that is exactly what a commit is all about, right? And this particular leaf, right, has got all the information of the work which you have done on that particular day, right? And anyone can actually, like anyone having access to your repository can actually access like see the changes of in that particular commit, right? So that is a very good explanation I tried to share with you, right? Like how you can understand like repository commits, right? This is a very great explanation, right? So now moving forward, right, now there is something called a CLI, right, a command line terminal, right? Like I said to you that we operate Git with a lot of commands, right? like for the various operations, right? So how do, like, where do we do it essentially, right? Like on what thing we actually do it, right? So there is something called the command line terminal, CLI, right? On Mac, like there is the terminal itself, right? Like of course on Windows there are things like command prompt and things like that, right? But of course, like if you want to use Git, like there is something called Git Bash, right, which you need to download and install on Windows, right? Where you can actually, once installed, like you can actually execute your Git commands and set up your repositories and all that, right? So this window is usually called like there is this black colored window, right? You can, this is a text-based application, right, for viewing, handling, and manipulating files on your computer, right? Like if you will know, right, like once you open any terminal, right, you can actually move into certain directories using the the cd command, right? Or maybe you can make directories using the mkdir command, right? Like so essentially there are various commands, right, which we actually use to do various operations on Git, right? So through the terminal, right, which we called as CLI, right? So that is what CLI is all about, right? So now moving forward, what are Git commands essentially, right? Like as I was saying, like there are a lot of commands which we use, right, to operate with Git, right? So here are some popular commands, right? Like, of course, there are a hell lot of commands, right, which we, can use, and like there are a lot of functionalities, right, which we can, of course, use, right? But these are some of the popular commands, right, which you should definitely know, right, if you're starting, your journey in the open source world, right? Like, starting to looking forward to contribute to various projects, right, or work on your own projects itself, right? So essentially, there is, that is where these commands come into play, right? So first up, like it's the git init command, right? So what this does is that, like, let's say you have created a project, like let's say you have created a folder, you have put a bunch of files in there, right? So like if you want to make it as a git repository, like let's say you want to track the changes which you will be doing over the next let's say 30 days or maybe 1 year or something, right? So what you need to convert it into a git repository, right? So how do you do that? You actually like you cd into that particular folder of your project, right? And you run the execute the git init command, right? So what it does is that it initializes an empty repository in your project, right? So once doing that, after that, like whatever changes you will be doing, like Git will be responsible to track those changes, right? Like say that is the duty of Git, right? So essentially this is the like the basic starting point, right, of using the git init command, right? Once you are starting off with a project or maybe even starting off with contributing to someone else's project, right? So having said that, now coming to some more popular commands, right? So it's the second one is the git add command, right? So what the add command does is that like let's say you have made some changes, right? Like today you have worked on a couple of files, right? And you've made some code changes, right? Now you want to save those changes, like of course, like you will be switching off your computer or maybe like something you want to close your editor or something like that, but you will want to save it and maybe push it to some like maybe we will be discussing that as well, right? Like we will be pushing it to like on some online server or something, right? So how do you do that? Like the primary steps are if that you run the git add command and that the git commit command, right? So what the add will do is that it will make your changes ready for committing, right? So it will be moving your changes to something called a staging area, right? Where those changes are ready for committing, right? Like they are ready to be saved, right? And like converted as a leaf in the tree, right? Like as we were discussing, right? So that is exactly what git add does, right? And what git commit does is that you can put actually a message there, right? Like let's say git commit hyphen m and you put something in quotes, right? Like you put that okay, new feature added, right? Or something like that, right? Like you can put any sort of message there, right? And once you do that, right, all those changes which you have done actually gets converted into a leaf which we were showing in previously, right, and gets saved in that particular tree, right, which is nothing but your repository, right? So that is what git commit does, right? And what git status does is that it shows you what all changes you have made or what all changes are not committed or not saved, right, So it shows you the status of all that, right? So essentially, if you open up your terminal or your project one fine day and you don't remember what all files you have changed, right, or what are exactly the changes which you have made, you just simply run the git status command, right, in your CLI, right, and it will show you the entire history, like what all changes are not yet saved, right, not yet committed, right, and in which files exactly like you have made the changes, right. So that is what the git status command does, right. Now moving forward to like a couple of more much more popular commands, right, in terms of when you are contributing to various open source projects, right, or even doing your own project, right, or through an online server, right, like in our case, like it will be GitHub, right, like GitHub is a is an online serving platform, right, where we can actually run do the same operations which will be doing locally through our git bash or our git, right, essentially. So that is essentially that what GitHub does is that it provides you with a very nice interface, right, like where even if you don't know some commands, right, or how to execute them, you can actually use GitHub's interface to perform the same things, right, if you have actually hosted it or pushed it up on GitHub, right? So that is what GitHub does for you, right? So now coming back to the commands itself, right? Like git pull, git push, right? So what git pull will do is that, let's say you have made some changes, or maybe like there are some new things which have been done, online on your GitHub repository, right? Like over like if you have kept your project over GitHub itself, right? And someone maybe has made some changes there, or your friend has made some changes there, or you yourself have made some changes over there, right? But on your local machine, those changes are not there, right? Like it's not been updated yet. So what you do is you pull those changes, right? And how do you exactly do? You use the git pull commands, right? So that is what the functionality of git pull command is, right? Now talking about git push command, right? So it's the vice versa, right? So when you have made some changes locally and those changes are not there in the remote or on your online hosted project, right? So what you do is that you save the changes through the git add and commit commands, and then you execute the git push command, right? So it will do is that it will push all your changes, right, to over to your online hosted repository, right, over GitHub, right, or whatever the place may be, right. Like GitHub is not the only hosting service platform, right. Like there are platforms like GitLab, Bitbucket, right. A lot of platforms are there, right, but the operations and all, right, are much more or less same, right. So yeah, so that is what those things are about. Now the thing is that, like, of course, like these are some popular commands which I shared with you, right? Like how many commands, like there are, these are 6 commands, right? So the thing is, like, there are a lot of other commands as well, and of course, like there is a proper workflow, like how to execute the command, right, or what all much more detailed information, right, like what exactly happens under the hood, right. So all those details are there, right. And even like working on a certain project, how exactly will you follow, right, or how what are the exact steps which you need to do while executing these commands, right. So there are a lot of things involved in here, right. So how exactly you will go about it, or how exactly will you know that, right, after which command you need to execute what, right, what is the exact workflow, right. So right, like even when I'm talking about topics, right, like let's say you are learning, what should you learn first? Should you directly learn first what git push does, or maybe do you first need to learn what a repository is all about, right? Like there is an entire step flow, right, like which you need to follow. There needs to be an entire roadmap essentially, right, to learn git and github, right, while working on open source projects, right. So how do you need to do that, right? So there is, like, as I was mentioning, right, about Mentro, right, the free to use platform, right. As you can see here, right, like if you open up the application, like you will find the open source domain, right. You don't need to lose, of course, everything is free to use, right. You can just open it up, right. You will see the entire roadmap, structure for learning open source, right. Like there are of course various other domains as well, right. But if I'm talking about open source, you will see that everything is properly compiled, properly structured. And once you like, if you're learning on any topic, right, so you will find, the entire detailed, workflow being, discussed, what the command does essentially, right? Like every detail, right, through pictorial representation, like the best resources, the best documentations, out there on the internet are already been compiled and provided for you, right? And it's completely free to use, right? So of course you can go on there, and of course, make sure that you can learn from that, right? If you follow the entire roadmap, I'm pretty sure that you will be knowing, like, almost like what open source is all about, and how exactly you need to work even while working on your own project, or even like working on someone, like some other organizations projects as well, right? So yeah, so that is, of course, you can visit the website and download the app directly from there, right? Like, of course, and you can search it on Play Store as well, right? So yeah, so moving forward, right? So now that you, like, let's say you learned, right, and let's say you have, worked on your, like, open source skills, right? So how exactly you need to apply it and learn, right? So you need a place, where you can have that freedom, right? Like, of course, you can make your own projects, right? You can work on them. That's absolutely, the first thing, like, that's the first, beginning step for you. You should be working on your own projects first itself, right? But if I'm talking about, to get the experience of, contributing to some other projects, right? So here is a great place, right? Like, if I say, like, Mentro has its own, repository. If I can share it with you, like, even I'll, do a live demonstration, right? Like how you can actually, create your first pull request, right? Moving forward, right? So now talking some specifically things about Hacktoberfest, right? Like how you need to, make your PRs, or, right? How you need to go about your Hacktoberfest, right? So the thing is that you will find a lot of repositories out there on the internet, but make sure that, they have this Hacktoberfest topic in themselves, right? Like if they don't have the topic, those repositories aren't actually, part of Hacktoberfest, right? And their pull request won't be considered for your, Hacktoberfest pull request, right? Or your Hacktoberfest profile itself, right? So here, like, this is, so what this repository is, like, this is a, our community blog website repository, right? So here it's a blogging website, and mostly it's made with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? So people who are, beginning in web development, or even, are already good web developers, right? So you can, of course, head over here, right? I'll share the link, like, towards the end of session as well, right? So you can head over here, right? Like, of course, there are a lot of rewards, like exclusive perks as well, right? So which you can, make sure you avail them, right? So of course, like, here it is a great place, right? So, and even like if you don't know web development, like, this is also, much more familiar for technical content writers as well, right? Like you can actually, write a blog and send in a pull request as well, right? So that is also considered, right? So of course, like, so I'll say, like, it definitely you can check that out, right? So now moving, how exactly you can contribute, right? So to any open source project, right? So so doing a live demonstration, right? Like, once you go to any open source project, you will see a lot of issues, right? And a lot of issues have all these, labels, right? Like, this is, let's say, this is a high priority issue, right? Like, there will be something like, a medium priority, right? Or maybe you will find a lot of issues, which is a good first issue, right? As you can see here, right? So always try, like, if you're a beginner in open source, always try to find issues which have these levels, right? Like a good first issue or beginner issue, right? So those kind of issues are much more suitable for you, right? And you can actually, go ahead and start working on those issues, right? So having said that, right, of course, so let me do a live demonstration, like how exactly you need to, do, or how exactly you need to follow, right? So first, when you will come up to the, repository, the first thing you need to do is, you need to fork the repository, right? So you need to, fork it to your own, account, right? Now, once you will fork it, you will see that, here, as you can see, like, it shows my profile name, and it shows that, it's under my, profile, the repository itself, and it has been forked from this repository, right? So now, like, let's say I need to make some changes here, like I need to send a pull request, right? I have done a lot of changes, right? And I need to make make a pull request, right? So what I will do is that, like, the first thing is that I will like to create a new branch, right? So the default branch is of course the main branch, which was earlier the master branch, right? Like, but GitHub changed it to main, right? So what we can do is that we can create a new branch for ourselves, right? So let me just name it, something like this, right? And here I can click on create branch, right? So once that's done, like as you can see, I'm on this new branch, right? Now having done that, right? Now that I'm on my new branch in my own fork, right? What I will do, let's say I want to make some changes. Like let me go here, right? Like let's say I want to change this particular file, right? Now let me like edit this file directly, right? So let's say like I want to change this, right? So let me just make just, so this is just example, like how you can actually do your first pull request, or right, and you know go about making changes. So the thing which I will say is that don't try to do readme changes, right? Like don't try to make changes in uh, text or something. Like more focus more on making changes for your like code files, right? If you are doing web development, right? Or if you are someone like who is looking for doing technical content writing, of course you can create your own blog and send in a pull request, right? So every detail on guidelines that how exactly you need to pull request, you will find in the home page of this repository in the readme file, right? So you can do that, right? So now having, like, let's say I've made this change, right? So I can like put a commit message here, right? Updated the reply message, right? So I will put a meaningful commit message here, and I will, as you can see, it shows that commit directly to this particular branch, right? So I will click on commit changes, right? Cool. So as you can see that the file has been changed in my particular branch, right? So now that it has been changed, right, now I would like to create a pull request, right? Like I've made this change, I would like my change to get merged into the original repository, right? So I will go to the original repository. As you can see, like GitHub already like has tracked it, and it directly shows me. So that is what I was saying. GitHub already has a good interface, and you like it reduces a lot of task for you, right? So but if even like let's say it doesn't show this option to you, what the main flow is, you go to the pull request section. As you can see, there are some pull requests, right? So what you want to do is that click on the new pull request button. Right now a page like this will open up, right? What you need to do is compare across forks, right? And on in the forks you need to select your own fork, right? Which is in your profile, right? Which you forked just now, right? And select the branch wherein you have worked, right? So cool. Now that you have selected, now as you can see, it is showing exactly what changes have been made, right, from the original to the change which I made just now, right? And you can actually after having seen that and you're happy, right? So you can just create a pull request that you have made such and such, and put a title and description whatever needed, right? And create pull request, right? Cool. So as you can see that the pull request has been created, and you can see the files changed here, right? And once that is created, like of course this is ready for review, and the maintainers and administrators can actually review the pull request and merge it to the main repository, right? And once that is merged, that will be shown up like counted as your Hacktoberfest contribution as well, right? If you're contributing to this repository or any repository which has the Hacktoberfest label itself, right? So yeah, so that was, guys, like the main walkthrough, like what exactly you guys need to do and how exactly you guys need to create a pull request, right? So having said that, right, now returning to what it's all about, right? So of course, like if you are a web developer, as I said, or a technical content writer, right, you can head over to the repository. You can take a screenshot of this slide. Even I'll share the link as well, right? So of course you can head over, and of course like there are some exclusive swag packs and rewards in addition to the swags you will be getting from Hacktober, like DigitalOcean for Hacktoberfest, right? From Mentor's side as well, right? For some quality contributors, right? So that is of course there. right? But even open source in general, like of course, one thing I'll suggest that open source in general is much more than just rewards and perks, because it already teaches you a lot, which which is gonna be gonna be using in your career, like going forward, right? So that in itself is a much more rewarding thing, if I say about that, right? So yeah, so having said that, so yeah, guys, so like that was it from my side. Like of course, like there will be a Q&A session towards the end. Like you can of course hit me up with questions, right? But of course, other than that, you can connect me on with me on LinkedIn, right? You can follow me up on Twitter. You can mail me up on on my mail address, right? Like if you have any queries or anything to ask about, right? You can take a screenshot of this as well, right? So yeah, and of course, like the last thing, right? Like of course, and there is an exclusive program, right? Which we at Mentor are currently, this is a something like an insider program, right? Which we are actually collaborating with a lot of colleges like IISCs, NITs, right? And we have already been a part there, right? So essentially, like there is something for your college as well, right? So this is something like extremely practical, right? Which you won't find out there in the internet anywhere, right? Like a lot of these influencers and gurus and creators, all these people out there in the social media today, they don't tell you about those kind of things, right? They just only focus on their followers and on their, like, they just keep on creating content, right? So we have come up with something very practical, right? And if you're preparing for your next job or internship, right, I'm definitely sure that you would be liking to, be a part of this exclusive program, right? So this is actually a very accessible program, right? And like anyone, like even if you don't have a lot of, credibility upon yourself, like, if you're not that much, let's say if you're in beginner in this journey, right? Or even if you are, like, let's say someone who has already done a lot of things and is actively looking for internships or jobs, right? So this is actually for everyone, right? So I'll share the link with you over the chat as well, right? Like you can actually go there and you can actually apply. So there is a Google form, right? So yeah, so this is a very exclusive program, right? Which we are only collaborating with some selective colleges, and this is something very practical and something very exclusive, right? So all the details about the program, like of course I just gave a brief about what the program is like, would sound like, right? So of course, like all the details you will find in the form itself, right, while applying, right? And of course, like the team will definitely get in touch with you as well, right? So yeah, guys, so like that was it for my side, right? Like about the how this session turned out to be. So I'm sure that a lot of people here, right, like would definitely have got some value out of it, right? So yeah, so I will be taking up questions now, right? So feel free to, guys, if you have any questions, like feel free.
Thanks a lot, sir, for that very, very insightful space into Hacktoberfest and open source programming. So I hope you guys have learned a lot from him. And we'll be starting the Q&A right now. So if you guys have any doubts at all, if at all you have any doubts, please drop them in the chat box and my co-host will read them out. And sir will answer them as much as he could. So please drop your doubts, guys. If you have any small doubt regarding Mentro, internships, Hacktoberfest, open source programming, whatever you guys have, you can just drop it down in the chat. So, okay, Rajiv, what do you want to know if you're a complete beginner? I'll just let me go. Oh, yes. So, Anakshi, you can take the space here, okay?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so Rajiv, you're a complete beginner. So what particular you want to know, please drop it in the chat section. We'll be passing on the most relevant questions to our speaker.
Yeah, and also, guys, I'm sharing all the links which I promised, right, on the chat itself, so you guys can take a look from there, right, and can access the links, right, and use the things, right? So, yeah, sure.
Any other questions, guys? Please be a little bit responding. Okay, so Rajiv, I'll be asking your questions to sir. So Rajiv wants to know that to move ahead in developer world, what should he do next? Where should he start from?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, like there are some particular things, right? Like if you're just a beginner and looking to start off your journey in this domain, right? So essentially, what you need to do is you need to choose a particular domain first of all, right? Like there are a lot of domains like Android development, web development, right? Machine learning, right? A lot of domains are there. I won't suggest machine learning just for just yet, right? Because in India, like there are not a lot of fresher jobs or internships in case of machine learning, but that is not something which I can say for maybe web development or Android development or some other kind of DevOps, right? So there are a lot of things, right? So you need to do some research about that, see what domain you are liking the most, or you need to make some projects in every domain and see what suits you the best, right? And in that domain you will be needing to proceed further, right, to learn more about it, right? So yeah, so that is the first thing which you need to do. And once you have chosen the domain, right, and if you're finding it difficult to build projects, right, and difficult to move forward for your next internship, of course you can apply at the Live with Mentor program, right, which I shared the link already, right? So you can take a look there and you can directly apply there, and the team will definitely get in touch with you, right, and can help you out there, right? So that is something which you can do. But of course, the first step is that choosing a domain and starting to make couple of projects in every domain and see what suits the best for you, and from there you can move forward, right? So yeah. Yeah, so for language, I would suggest like there is no such limitation. Like of course, it's like let's say if you have chosen web development, you would want to learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? But in the same case, if you have chosen Android development, you should be learning something like languages like Java and Kotlin, right? So that is completely flexible, right? So if you don't have any knowledge in terms of languages or things like that, right? I will personally suggest that you can definitely go ahead with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? But if for people who have got certain some sort of programming knowledge or programming experience, I can definitely say they can pick up languages like Java, Kotlin, right, and can go ahead with fields like Android development, or maybe even if you know Python, right, you can go ahead with things like backend engineering in the web domain sector itself, right? Even there is sectors like DevOps, right? Developer operations, right? So of course, like there are a lot of things, right? Like there is no such mandation that you need to choose a certain language. It completely depends on what domain you want to work on, right? So yeah, so I hope that answers. Yeah.
Okay, so anyone else, if you have any kind of doubts, please drop it in the chat box. We are very much open to your queries. Okay, so I hope everyone is clear with what Sir has taught, and it was really informational session with Sir. Now, to before we bid goodbye to everyone, I would say that it was really an amazing session, and hope you have learned a lot of new things. Before we say goodbye to all of you, I would like to say that the sponsors of this event were the Mentor app. We would like to thank our sponsors. The link for the app has been provided in the chat box already. Go check it out. And to avail the maximum benefits, don't forget to check it out right now and register yourself for each and every course available there. It's absolutely free. So I'll hand over this whole setup to my co-host to begin forward.
All right, thank you, Sonakshi, and thank you, sir. And I hope you guys understood really, really well whatever sir wanted to convey to you guys. And if you guys have any doubts at all, as sir mentioned, you can reach out to him anytime on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or wherever. And please check out Mentro as soon as possible for internships, for whatever you guys want to achieve in that field. You will find lots of people there with the right guidance. Other than that, there will be a small form that you need to fill. This will be an attendance form, and the link has already been provided in the chat. So please check out that form. And if you were present in the meet, please fill that form promptly. That will help us plan our events better in the future. So please fill the form as soon as possible. And other than that, you can check out these social media links for Geeks Help You chapter and Oasis as well. I'll be dropping the links for those as well. Cool. Thank you guys for being here, and it has been a wonderful session. So with this, I'd like to thank you all and goodbye. So you guys can leave now.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your precious time. Thank you, sir.
And please make
Yes,
sure
thanks.
to
Had a great time.
yeah. So you can go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I had a great time, guys. Thanks for hosting me, right? Hoping to, join in for future sessions as well, right? So yeah, take care, everybody.
All right. And guys, please don't forget to fill the attendance form as well. It is very much necessary. So please make sure you fill the attendance form. Thank you.